What is up, everyone, and welcome in to Blues Central on STL Sports Central, as always, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. It has been a while, but we are back with the gang. Good to see Thomas Welch and Mike Meyer. I know you guys have done a couple of things together, but my first time, I think, since Game 7, being on a Blues show here on STL Sports Central. We don't need to talk about that. I'm just gonna talk about how good it is to see you guys. How are we doing today?
Not bad. You know, the hair's growing back a little bit. So since the last time you seen me, we got a little bit of tennis ball fuzz on top of the dome. So that's great. But I'm just more so excited about the St. Louis Blues, the offseason, how it's looking, it really feels like they're ramping up to, not only make the playoffs this year, but make some noise in the playoffs. And as we know, a St. Louis Blues fan, anytime you make it into the dance, you have a chance. So I think the Blues are kind of gearing up for that, and it's beautiful to see, especially given the contrast to the St. Louis Cardinals on the other side. So,
yeah, we're gonna stick to Blues today, my friend. even though Mike's got the card shirt on. It's been a busy offseason for the Blues. How's everything going? And as we begin to get into this, what have been some of the takeaways from the start of the offseason for the Blue Note?
It's been good. I've really liked some of the moves that they've made. It really hasn't been like the big splashes I think that I anticipated them to make, but with some of the contracts that were handed out, I certainly think that they avoided some of the higher price tags. Mikael Granlund getting $7 million. I think that was a good move that the Blues ultimately ended up avoiding, as opposed to, hey, we landed Mikael Granlund. Because if you had told me that we got Mikael Granlund at 3 years, great. But you said $7 million annually, I'd say, what the heck are you doing? So I think ultimately it's been a pretty good one. Not overly upset or disappointed. A lot of good moves and a lot of good opportunities opening up here for a lot of guys.
And I think that's a brilliant point that you made, Mike, is when you take into consideration all the contracts that were going out. Like, I think one of the biggest things that Doug Armstrong does well in his time as the St. Louis Blues GM is avoiding as many as possible of those contracts that tend to bite you. Obviously, he still has some on the team, but it looks like he's working on getting rid of those as well. So we'll get into that too. Obviously, Nick Leddy being a part of that essentially. And, the San Jose Sharks picked him up off of waivers to try to hit the cap floor. But even going with a guy like Faksa, gets, I think, $3 million a year with Dallas, which is crazy because we were paying him $1 million. You go get a guy like Nick Bjugstad, who, potentially, I think he's 6'6", so he's a monster. And if you're going to put him on your fourth line, adds a little bit of more like offensive upside, which really, with the guys that we have playing on that on that fourth line, whether it's Torpachenko, whether it's Sundqvist, whether it's Walker, those guys have offensive upside like we saw last year. So I think he slots into there perfectly. And then a guy like Suter coming in from Vancouver, 25 goals last year with a mediocre Vancouver game. If he's got Holloway on his wing and Kyrou, there's no reason to think that he won't get 30 plus this year. So I think given the contracts and given the upside of the guys that he's brought in so far, and it looks like he's still doing some work to bring in more guys, as we'll get into, I think he's done a phenomenal job of navigating this offseason thus far.
Yeah, we're gonna hit that here in just a second here. So we'll start off, or we'll go into some of the rumors around Buffalo Sabres defenseman Bowen Byram in just a moment. But before that, overall, and you guys had mentioned a couple of them, quite a few additions, a handful of subtractions for this Blues team to start off the offseason. What has been the most notable, or the one that you guys have either liked or taken the most away from here to start things off in the 2025-26 offseason?
I think the biggest one here for me was the Nick Leddy move. And it seems like it's something so small, but it allowed the cap also to be freed up to be able to sign Suter. Because if you don't move Leddy out, you're looking to be able to move the contract, some other place, but to just free up that money. And I think without it, it's hard to then sign him. And so, you get him here off the books, and then frees up also a roster space here for somebody else to come in and to look at a roster spot here for them. And then you're going to bring in Suter. So the reallocation of money, I think, from him was probably one of the best, if not like the most underrated move that Armstrong has made all offseason.
Thomas?
For me, the biggest one and the most telling one, I think, has been the Zachary Bolduc trade. I know Mike and I kind of broke it down as soon as it came out. So if you haven't watched that video yet, make sure to check it out on STL Sports Central's YouTube. But the biggest tell for me there was not only how much Doug Armstrong and the Blues front office and even Jim Montgomery value Logan Mailloux's development and his potential and where he's going to slot in on this team, because you are trading a guy that was a first round pick, right? And then has a world of potential, as we saw in this last season, almost got to 20 goals on the year, and power play monster as much as you like, and brings the physicality like we want in Blues hockey. So Doug Armstrong has gone on record to say like this was not an easy trade to make because he believes Bolduc has a world of potential. He just believes that, in my opinion, that Mailloux has that same potential on the defensive side and being a right-hand shot, seeing all the contracts. I mean, we just missed out on Noah Dobson, who's making a bag. If you can bring in a guy that, his ceiling is Noah Dobson, or if they have an inkling to believe that maybe one day he is even a step lower than Noah Dobson, like that's still a huge plus for this team in acquiring Logan Mailloux. So I think that tells you, like, the return of Bolduc for Mailloux tells you what exactly they think of Mailloux and how he's going to play this season, but it also tells you what they think of Jordan Kyrou, right? Like, I've seen a bunch of and I love you guys, Montreal Canadiens fans, but when you're coming at me for mock trades and just completely reading my tweets wrong, I got to come out and provide some clarity, right? So there was a tweet that like blew up that was saying I was trying to trade Kyrou for Suzuki and Caulfield. I don't know in what scenario that would ever make sense in a million years, but that's not what I was saying. All I'm saying is the Blues place a high emphasis on their leading goal scorer on a team-friendly contract for the next however long, right? So they're not going. This is not a cap dump scenario. This is not. I don't know why the Blues want to get rid of Jordan Kyrou so bad. They don't. They're just listening to offers because Doug Armstrong is trying to make this team better. And if someone's going to overpay for Jordan Kyrou and that makes this team better, then he's obviously going to do that. But you're not going to get Jordan Kyrou for a bucket of pucks and a couple first round picks in 2034. Like, that's a ridiculous sentiment. But I think Montreal and the Blues pivoting to Bolduc showed you how much hardball Doug Armstrong was playing with the Canadiens in his negotiations. And I think when they pivoted down to Bolduc instead, it kind of set the tone of like, okay, you can have this right winger instead. I'll ease up a little bit on him, but I'm not going to flex on getting rid of our leading goal scorer, a guy with a world of potential, one of the fastest skaters in the NHL, and literally got Selke votes. Like, we keep talking about that, but like his biggest knock has been his defensive game. And we saw it was like plus 20 on the year. Like, by all accounts, this was his best season defensively, and he still produced offensively. So there's no reason for Doug Armstrong to sell him low when he's at really the prime of his career, and you're looking to sell him high. So that's why I named Suzuki and Caulfield, because those would be names that would make sense for the Blues in a trade scenario with Montreal. Not that I'm expecting to get them in return. So obviously we'll get into that talk as well. But in my opinion, I don't see a way that trade goes through at this point because of the contrast there and what the Montreal Canadiens are looking to acquire or what they're willing to give up for Kyrou and what Doug Armstrong wants to get in return.
Going back for a moment to the Logan Mailloux, Zack Bolduc trade. You guys, as you mentioned, had some immediate breakdown and thoughts on that. To me, it felt like St. Louis when they saw Zack Bolduc traded for defenseman that has played 7 games in the National Hockey League. There was a little bit of panic in St. Louis, right? Because you're giving up a guy. Let's be honest. It is a risk. You're giving up a guy that cemented himself in 2024, 2025 as a guy that is going to be able to score goals. 19 goals, and all of those coming after the hiring of Jim Montgomery. Clearly, something was unlocked in Zack Bolduc. He is going to, all signs point to that he is going to go on and have a great career in the NHL. But so, as mentioned, it's a little bit of a risk. And I think the Blues fans in the moment are thinking, what are you doing? Why would you give up a guy that was has been so promising, had such a great year, for a guy that is such a question mark, right? The reason that I bring all that up is, and here's my question. As people have been able to process, as you guys have been able to process this trade a little bit more, and you think about potentially some of the upsides of a guy like Logan Mailloux, and I'm not sure what your guys' immediate thoughts were on this, but have you found your thoughts and analysis as to the trade as a whole. Has it changed or adjusted at all as time has gone on? You've been able to look more at how the Blues view Logan Mailloux or anything like that?
I don't think that my opinions necessarily changed all that much. I think that they're still definitely in a wait and see because he still has the potential to absolutely be a top pairing defenseman here in the NHL. He has the potential to be a bottom pairing defenseman here in the NHL. Like you don't know what you're getting here from him. And the fact that the Blues traded Zachary Bolduc away, who has all the promise to be an excellent scoring winger, not just on the power play, but just here a consistent 5-on-5 scoring presence here on the second line. It is a lot to be able to give up. But if Logan Mailloux lives up to his potential, then the Blues got themselves a heck of a deal, and Montreal got themselves a heck of a player. So again, you have to be able to give to get in any single situation here like this, in any single normal hockey trade, Dick, you have to be able to give to get. It does really, really bite that the Blues had to be able to give up such a promising player in Zachary Bolduc. But that's also, with the understanding that you now have a spot that could be available for a Dalibor Dvorsky. Down the line, there could be a spot here for Otto Stenberg. There could be a spot for Kaskema. Like, there's so many other guys who are going to be coming up who could produce that same rate here as Zachary Bolduc. Yep, absolutely. And we'll get into him here as well. So I think that there's a lot of potential that still has to come from from a Logan Mailloux. But again, it's one of those fear of the unknowns, and you just love a guy like Zachary Bolduc so much. And I think this should be such a heartfelt letter from Blues fans that we're this upset about this. And I think how much that he was just so loved and treasured just here in St. Louis.
The one thing that changed it a lot for me was I was trying to watch and intake as much draft coverage as possible, even though, the decentralized draft was kind of a nightmare, but we'll save that topic for another day. I think when you understand the drafting process of the St. Louis Blues, right, they talk about blocks and whether those players fit into their blocks. I think they said that Carbonneau was the last player that was in their block. So if they went for anybody else, it wouldn't necessarily be best player available. They would be drafting more for need. And I think when they talked about the draft of Mailloux and Bolduc in hindsight, it felt to me like Doug Armstrong didn't say this, but it felt to me he was implying that Mailloux was in a block not much higher, but a higher block than Bolduc was. So essentially, if all of the things that happened in the background didn't happen and Mailloux didn't say, don't draft me, Doug Armstrong would have taken Mailloux at 17. Right. Instead, he didn't draft him because he was asked not to. He drafted Bolduc, and then he gets taken at 31 or whatever it was to Montreal. And he's like, what the hell? I thought we weren't drafting this kid. So he still ends up getting a guy that was in a block higher.
A good portion of the NHL was probably thinking that as well.
Yes, exactly. So,
there's a good chance he goes higher than 17.
Correct. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the main point there from a drafting process. I mean, we talked about this on the breakdown, but if you trust Doug Armstrong to really nail on his first round picks consistently, regardless of where they're at, whether it's 10 with Dvorsky, whether it's 17 with Tarasenko, or, all these guys, like 9 times out of 10, he finds the diamond in the rough, whatever it is. Like we talk about the decentralized draft, but really like some of these, they would pull up Zoom calls and the Boston Bruins are sitting there like they don't even hear the reception, but it's 3 guys. And then they're like, let's go to the St. Louis Blues. And it's a round table of 24 dudes in suits, just like sitting there ready to do like Knights of the Round Table for King Arthur. It's like, I mean, that's why the Blues are so successful at their drafting process, right? Because they have an entire committee dedicated to it, and most of them are former NHLers. Doug Armstrong, in his press conference afterwards, talking about Mailloux, said he's got a top 4 talent as a defenseman, which I think he's talking about immediate, because why would you trade Zachary Bolduc, an NHLer, for a guy that's going to be playing the AHL? And he also said he's got potential for an upside of that. So if you're talking about a top pairing guy, I don't think we talk about timelines and all of that stuff, but there's not many scenarios where you see Zachary Bolduc being a top line guy for this team unless, because Jimmy Snuggerud's in the fold and Jordan Kyrou. I mean, those are huge names to jump in that process. And it seems like the Blues really, They're talking about trading Jordan Kyrou, and they traded Zachary Bolduc. I've not heard Jimmy Snuggerud's name in anything, so it really feels like his name is off limits. So that should tell you a lot about him as well. So there's a whole lot of breadcrumbs to pick up in these press conferences here and there, but they're starting to put together the pieces of the puzzle when you listen to Doug Armstrong, and it's exciting for everybody because it's leading to a better future of the St. Louis Blues.
Just a couple of minutes ago, Thomas, you kind of whispered into the mic. You said the name Carbonneau as one of those guys that could potentially be, have the ability to be a production-wise a guy like Zachary Bolduc. Not necessarily a similar style in some ways. Good shot, a strong guy on the puck. Some news with him as of recent after being the Blues' first-round pick here in the 2025 NHL draft. The question had been, was he going to return to the QMJHL, or was he going to go play in the NCAA with Boston College? And just recently, it was announced that he is going to be returning to the QMJHL with the Armada. I'm curious as to what your guys' thoughts are overall on that decision, the pros and the cons to it. Would love to hear your thoughts. I'll start with you, Mike.
I really like this move. One of the bigger advantages, I think, one like playing in the CHL here with this is that he does get more playing time. The Armada are slated to be a really, really good powerhouse team here again this season. And when he just finished out this past year, 46 goals, 89 points in 62 games, and you're talking about another level up above this, let's just say I'm going to be busy covering this kid here for prospect coverage here this coming season. So I'm really looking forward to that. The only downside here, realistically, I mean, I was also looking forward selfishly to him playing on a line with James Higgins. I think those two could have just torn up the NCAA. He would have played fewer games, but he also would have played up against, I think, some bigger guys, a little bit of a higher talent level here in the NCAA. So he goes back to a spot that he's a little bit more comfortable with, and the coaching staff is comfortable here with him, and they know him. So he has a good chance to just return to what's familiar and grow his game in a similar fashion that he's familiar here with. So I can completely respect that. Again, the only downside here with it is that the talent level, in my opinion, is just not as strong in the CHL and in the QMJHL here, like as a whole. So there is a little bit of that downside here with it. But you do have the chance that he goes now here to training camp and even earn himself a quick cup of coffee here in the beginning of the season before potentially returning to the CHL here for 25-26.
Thomas, anything in addition to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest pro for me is the opportunity for him to potentially get minutes with the big club, right? And obviously in a Doug Armstrong organization, you're preaching patience and 3 to 4 years for these first round picks to really pan out and make it. And then he goes on the radio airwaves and is like, yeah, this guy's going to make it difficult for us come training camp. I mean, he's pumping out highlight reel goals left and right at prospects. Obviously that's against a little bit, smaller bodies and younger talent. But if he makes those same waves at training camp, I mean, we're talking about the best prospect really that the Blues have had in that regard since a guy like David Perron to come in and make noise. So I think giving him the opportunity, when you go side by side with the NCAA and the QMJHL, maybe the NCAA edges out the QMJHL just a little bit. But when you take into consideration the fact that they are going to be looking at him hard for potential, bottom 6 minutes, and we talked about that vacancy that Zachary Bolduc just left, moving over to Montreal, I think there's an opportunity here for him to get his cup of coffee in the NHL, take full advantage of it. And next thing you know, you got another dude in the Calder conversation for the St. Louis Blues, which would be a brilliant problem to have.
This is Blues Central on STL Sports Central. As always, we are presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Be sure to download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use the code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customer to play. $5. Only $5, guys, and you get $50 back in Pick 6 credits. What a deal that is. It really is better payouts and bigger wins, and it's only with Pick 6 From DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
He is Thomas Welch. He is Mike Meyer. I'm Ethan Hannaford. This is Blues Central on STL Sports Central. If you're looking above us, you see right there. There it is. You see this heading that says, "Are the Blues still in on Bowen Byram?" You're thinking that we're 20 minutes in. Are they ever going to discuss this freaking thing? Now's the time where we talk about it. It's been very interesting to follow the rumor mill. It always is in the NHL, but for the Blues specifically, there have been very few teams, in my opinion, guys, that have had their team name in the mill more than the Blues have when you consider the talks around Jordan Kyrou prior to his no trade clause kicking in. And then the Blues go out and they trade for Mailloux and they make all these acquisitions. And then still the rumor mill is going for the potential for Bowen Byram, a left-handed defenseman who does lean more so on the offensive side as far as D-men go than he does defensive as far as strengths go. You hear all these rumors about the Blues potentially being in on him. I want to hear your guys' thoughts as a whole. Let's address the rumors. Let's start with this. Why would Bowen Byram, with what the Blues have already added, why would Bowen Byram to St. Louis make sense? Thomas, I'll start with you.
I think it makes the most sense because, if you're taking into consideration that, I don't think the Blues go out and get a guy like Bowen Byram unless they have a plan to move a guy like Justin Falk, right? So I think those two deals are kind of contingent on each other. Bowen Byram also has the flexibility to play on the right side, which we saw, gave Nick Leddy probably a longer extended stay with the St. Louis Blues than they probably would have liked. So that flexibility on the back end of the defense, I think, helps them a lot. So if you think about Bowen Byram coming in and providing immediate help on the right side for the St. Louis Blues, right? Let's say you've got Parayko on the right side, Byram on the right side, and then also Mailloux on the right side. I mean, you're loaded on the right side there. And then also, if you have a future plan of shifting Bowen Byram over to the left side, because it sounds like that's where he's most comfortable, and he had a great point season. I think 38 points with the Buffalo Sabres last year, which is actually more points than Colton Parayko had last season. We all know how fantastic of a season that Colton Parayko had, 16 goals. So Byram provides, I wouldn't say it's the same talent level, and he's got a long way to go with his defensive side of the play. But he's also a lot younger, right? And then the Blues Bible this entire offseason has been, how do we get younger, 20 to 25 years, skill guys, bring them in, and then we've got, a core to build together and really make some noise for a Stanley Cup. So someone who falls outside of that age range is Cam Fowler. Obviously, he was, by all regards, when he came into the St. Louis Blues, their best defenseman in terms of point production, led the team in playoff point production, which is insane for a guy like Cam Fowler, but he is up there in age. I think he's over 30. So if you think that long-term, at the end of the season, his contract will be up. Long-term, if he doesn't fit into your plans, whether it be age, whether it be production, can he have that same season again? If you bring Bowen Byram in, move on from Cam Fowler, and then you've got a top pairing of Bowen Byram and Colton Parayko, or even a top four of Bowen Byram, Parayko, Broberg, and Mailloux. I mean, that's a loaded roster for the St. Louis Blues, not just this season, not just next season, but years down the road if you lock all of those guys up, because I think Broberg will be coming up on a contract as well. But he's got the same agent as Byram too, so maybe you can, do a discount deal there in terms of bulk and keep your guys together. I don't know. All I'm saying is you can really turn this defensive core, which we've talked about for years, even going back to the years after the Blues won the Stanley Cup, in losing Pietrangelo. This is our weakness, defensive side of the puck. Now Doug's trying to come in and say, how do we make this weakness into a strength? And I think Bowen Byram fits perfectly into that, as well as the age group that they're going for.
You mentioned Cam Fowler. He is due for an extension at the end of this upcoming season. There had even been some talk about, could we see him get extended this offseason? We haven't seen that yet. Maybe perhaps that is dependent on if they are able to add a guy like a Bowen Byram. Let me ask you this, Mike. What makes more sense to you? We know how good of a season Cam Fowler had. We also know that he is getting up there in age, as Thomas mentioned. The age most definitely is an upside to a Bowen Byram, but it seems like this might come down to what is the return going to have to be. And the guy that is getting mentioned more than anyone else as far as the who would it take to bring in Bowen Byram is Jake Neighbours. Now, we know that the Blues went into this offseason with plenty of depth on the wing. It is something that Doug Armstrong had mentioned several times and kind of hinted at that that's what they were going to be shopping. We see Zack Bolduc go out. And while there is still plenty of depth, when you mention, especially when you take into consideration the number of prospects that they have on the wing, Carbonneau being one of them that they just drafted, there's still plenty there, but there isn't a lot of guys that play the style of game, whether it be in the prospect pool or on the Blues roster currently, that do like Jake Neighbours, who tends to be up front, a good net front presence. I'm curious, if it was straight up Jake Neighbours for Bowen Byram, are you doing it?
No. You're getting a straight out 20 to 25 goals consistent. He's the Brendan Morrow here, like of this generation. I mean, he plays a gritty style. He can play up and down the lineup, regardless of which side that you put him here on. It's so hard to be able to replace a guy like that. The fact that they do have a Cam Fowler that they can extend, who did play really, really well here for the Blues this past season. Again, it's yet to be seen of like what next season here is going to look like. It's going to be yet to seen on how that he's going to age. You don't know. And also, like, what is he going to command here for his next contract? There's so many unknown and so many variables that play into this. The Blues know what they have here in a Jake Neighbours. And this is a guy who I firmly believe could be one of the next captains of the squad. He's just that good. And I think he just matters that much here to this locker room. And so the fact that you'd be giving up that, not just the production on the ice, but the intangibles that Jake Neighbours brings here to this lineup, I think that's too much. I think that's absolutely too much here to be able to give up. And I get why it makes sense that the Buffalo Sabres would ask for him in exchange here for a Bowen Byram. I absolutely think that it makes all the sense in the world. But for me, if I'm Doug Armstrong or Alexander Steen or whoever, the combination of the names that you want to throw up there, I'm not giving up Jake Neighbours here in this deal.
Very quickly before we move on, question for both of you. Is it realistic for the Blues to acquire Bowen Byram without Jake Neighbours being involved? Thomas?
I think it's not realistic without Jake Neighbours involved, but I think it is worth the price of Jake Neighbours, because if you're getting a guy like Bowen Byram for the future, but that also allows you to get out of a contract, in Justin Falk, which we know that Doug Armstrong 10 times out of 10 will not retain money on a contract. If any other team, and I don't know that Justin Falk waives his no trade clause to go to Buffalo, because why would you, right? But if any other third team is in that deal and it allows you to move his contract and $6.5 million a year to a different team, bring in a guy like Bowen Byram, allocate those dollars to him and the future of this squad, I think it's worth it in the long run. And I'll actually ask you a follow-up question, Mike, for you to ponder. Tell me the difference in play style between Jake Neighbours and Justin Carbonneau.
Well, right now, there's not a lot of a difference. It's whether or not that you think that Justin Carbonneau is ready to take on a role and produce the same clip that a Jake Neighbours is playing at. They both play at very, very similar styles. And I actually said this here not too long ago. I think that fans are going to resonate with this here. Well, Justin Carbonneau reminds me of this era's TJ Oshie. So if you're getting that here in your lineup, if you're replacing a Jake Neighbours, I mean, again, I don't think I'm able to make that just yet, because you don't know where Justin Carbonneau is going to slot in here just yet, when he's going to slot in, and really give that up, plus a Zachary Bolduc all in the same offseason. I think that's a tough pill to swallow.
But it follows the same train of thought, right? Like if you asked me before this offseason started, would you trade Zachary Bolduc for an unknown? I would say, I don't know why the Blues would ever do that. That's a risky move to make. And then they go out and do it, right? So would you trade Jake Neighbours essentially for an unknown that you have in your prospect pool right now in Carbonneau? And I would say the Blues would never do that. Carbonneau just got drafted, right? It's like, that'd be crazy and out of character for them to do. There's a chance that they go do it and prove us all wrong. I'm just saying.
I think something else to take into consideration, the Blues are kind of in this interesting spot, right, where I think that most people would say, like, okay, it's go time. The window is opening, but they also have a lot of guys in the pool that to where it feels like they could be in the mix here for a long time. They have set themselves up really well in this retool. The question now, like for the direct, right, is if you trade away Jake Neighbours while you are getting a solid piece back in Bowen Byram, are you 5% better, like Doug Armstrong said was the goal going into next season? Are you 5% better than you were this year? And offensively, I don't know if you necessarily are. Bowen Byram, I think long-term would be a great addition, but does it make you better for the now? I don't know if it necessarily does.
No, and I think because you don't know what you've got in Logan Mailloux here just as of yet. You don't know what Bowen Byram would truly end up being here with the Blues because over the last season he looked great when he was paired with Rasmus Dahlin, but Rasmus Dahlin makes almost anybody look good. Right. So, it's hard to really say what Bowen Byram is at this point in time, in his career, not to mention what the price tag and his term's going to look like. He's going to arbitration here right now. He's likely going to be filing for 2 years. And so at that point in time, then you're trading for a guy who's got 2 years and he's going to be looking at unrestricted free agency and more than likely looking to be able to cash in. And so if there's no guarantee that I can be able to get a Bowen Byram on a long-term contract and I'm giving up a Jake Neighbours, that's another factor here against it here for me.
We could be discussing this Bowen Byram, especially. I'm loving hearing the argument, the disagreements between you two. We could be discussing this all day, but surprise, surprise, we're going longer than we said we were going to go. So
let us know what you guys think in the comments. Bowen Byram, yes or no, and why?
Yes, absolutely. This will not be the only Blues Central podcast throughout the offseason. We're going to continue to be having these conversations. So let's go ahead and let's switch on to the next topic here, guys. And that's been Jordan Kyrou, another guy that, I think even more so than the Bowen Byram rumor mill, I've been more surprised to see Jordan Kyrou's name getting floated around. And when we say floated around, it means, right, the teams are calling and that Doug Armstrong's listening. And any good general manager, president of hockey operations is going to listen. It's what you do. Does that mean anything? There's any smoke to it, actually? Well, that's the question that I'm going to be asking you here, guys. There's been some talk that Montreal is in on the mix, asking about him, as you had mentioned earlier here in the episode, Thomas. So, Jordan Kyrou, actual trade candidate, or is this just smoke?
I think it's just smoke. When you take into consideration Doug Armstrong's comments, like he was like, I'm not talking about the Jordan Kyrou, but also, by the way, like if we were to make a trade, I'm not saying we would, but if we do, then here's what it would potentially look like. And he was talking about Apple for an Apple in terms of a hockey trade. So like I said earlier, it feels like the only guys that have apples to Jordan Kyrou's apples on the Montreal Canadiens right now are Suzuki and Caulfield. And as we saw by the uproar of people bringing their pitchforks and flames to me, it doesn't look like they're bringing up any of those guys anytime soon in trade considerations. And I don't blame them for that. But for that reason, I'm out. Shark Week.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any sense. Unless you're absolutely getting a bona fide number one defenseman that's coming in here. If you're getting, I would think it has to be a number one center. And the Blues aren't looking to be able to usurp Robert Thomas here right now. And you've got Dalibor Dvorsky, who's going to be on his way to be able to become the Blues number 2 center. So I think then you're just blocking other guys here internally just to be able to make a move. And I'm sorry, but why am I moving away from a guy who has 3 straight seasons here with over 30 goals, 2 of the past 3 seasons with over 35 goals? And like you said, he's only gotten better here defensively. He's meaning more and more here to your squad. He's now also got the full no trade clause here until, the cows come home. It's just another hurdle. It's just smoke. I don't see any reason why the Blues should make that move. And I don't see any logical reason why this move would happen.
Yeah, the Canadiens aren't getting rid of Demidov. They're not getting rid of Slavkovsky. The Blues don't want Kirby Dach or Patrick Laine. That'd be a nightmare having him in there. It doesn't feel like Caden Gooley fits like what the Blues are looking for. And if they're in on Bowen Byram, then that complicates things as well. So and the Canadians obviously aren't moving on from Hudson, and they're not going to flip flop and trade Noah Dobson to us. So it's like everywhere you look at, there's just some reason for it not to make sense. And I think that's going to end up why it's just smoke. Not necessarily that these two teams didn't want to trade with each other. It's just that the trades that they both kept bringing up didn't work out for either.
And not to mention, right, I mean, the value for Jordan Kyrou on that contract is only going to continue to get better if we continue to see the rate of growth in which we've seen from him in the last couple of years. And you said it just a moment ago, Mike, the quality that we have seen from him on the defensive side has continued to grow. He's becoming more and more of a 200-foot player every year. You take into consideration the raising of the salary cap, that 8x8 or 8 and change, whatever it is, that only looks better and better every single year because these contracts, as we've seen this year, I mean, Mitch Marner, just an example, right? But these guys are getting bigger and bigger contracts every year. That 8x8 is going to continue to look better and better year by year. And as you said, Thomas, is there anyone in the league, not even the Montreal Canadiens, but anyone in the league that is shopping a guy similar to the style of Jordan Kyrou, where you feel like you're getting the same amount of return offensively to where you feel like you're not taking a step back in your goal production, which has been an issue for the Blues in the past couple of years? I don't think that there is anywhere. I agree with you guys. I believe that this is just smoke as well.
And we also saw Jordan Kyrou, especially towards the end of the year when he was paired with Dylan Holloway, just as an absolutely man on fire, right? Like that pairing of Holloway and Kyrou was electric, and then Holloway goes down with an injury, right? So we still don't know the full extent. Like they haven't had really like a full off season together to really hone in and practice, although it does look like they've gotten really close in terms of, getting in extra reps after training. So that bodes well for Jordan Kyrou to have a career year this season. And then you bring in a guy like Suter, like we talked about, to center that line. We had 25 goals last year, like I said, on a mediocre kind of middle of the pack Vancouver team. Like I will go on record and guarantee right now that Jordan Kyrou this season hasn't started yet, will have the best year of his career offensively and production wise and defensively.
If he doesn't, are we going
to No. I can't go down that road again.
Let's do it again.
Yeah. It's just coming back. I'm not ready to put my hair on the line, but I will say a bona fide hashtag Tommy guarantee that Jordan Kyrou will have the best year of his career this season.
Was it Cam? Was it Cam that did it? Was he the one that shaved it away?
Yeah.
Jansen. I mean, you think about good two truths and a lie. My God, Cam Jansen shaved my head. I mean,
what a world.
What a world. Amen to that. You're going to be able to tell your kids that someday. So pretty dang cool. Listen, this has been a lot of fun, guys. We're going to wrap. One final thing, some sad news within the network, within the for St. Louis Blues fans. Just a few days ago, they made the announcement that 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Network would be becoming a simulcast as far as their broadcast goes. Chris Kerber and Joe Vitale will now be broadcasting both radio and television-wise for Blues games, which means that attached with that, John Kelly's contract was not renewed. The TV play-by-play for the last 20 years for the Blues no longer, and had been here in St. Louis since the age of 8. I had read somewhere his dad, Dan Kelly, calling every season for the Blues following their first. So the Kellys have been around for a long time, and it's sad to see such a legendary broadcaster go. Any thoughts here before we wrap on just what will be a big change here for the way that the way in which the game is presented and heard by Blues fans on the television?
Listen, this is I from a business standpoint, like purely on paper, business, like, sure. I mean, I get it. Business decisions are oftentimes cold. And you can be able to say, well, it's just business. But like when it comes to the Kellys, I mean, it's not just that. He is, as in my opinion, as much about Blues hockey as what Chris Kerber here is. And unfortunately, that decision to go to a simulcast, one of them was going to go. And they made the choice to go here with Chris Kerber and Joey. And I absolutely love and adore Chris and Joey. I think they do a phenomenal job. I just did not like the way that this happened. Again, I get it from a business standpoint, and that's where you have to just, I guess, kind of separate it out here a little bit. But because there's raw emotions, they're humans, and like you said, I think he spent 20 years here as the Blues play-by-play here over TV. So this was a hard pill to swallow. I couldn't believe when I got the email here about it. I couldn't believe it. So this is going to be different going into next season.
Yeah, I think the two big things that stick out for me the most are that John Kelly deserves to go out on his own terms, which feels like did not happen here, which is, I think, frustrating for everybody involved. And I don't think there's really a scenario where simulcast works. Like if you've got a radio broadcast crew dedicated to giving you a radio broadcast experience that's completely different from one that would work on TV and visual. So it just feels like after Panger, it was like, okay, like Panger's been here forever. Like, it's a shot in the heart, but it's like, at least we get to still see him on TNT. And like every time I see him, it still hurts. But then for this to happen so closely behind, and Panger even mentioned it, Bucci Gross mentioned it as well. So like the outpouring from the NHL community is this is not right. The outpouring for the St. Louis community is saying this is not right. I don't know. It feels like everyone's saying it's not right, except for the decision makers, which at the end of the day, like you said, Mike, probably from a business point and a standpoint of cost, like maybe it does make sense. But from the viewing perspective and from the fans' perspective, this is going to be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. And I don't know if it seems like already that some people aren't willing to swallow that pill. So we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, it's a tough time to be a St. Louis Blues fan from a broadcasting and viewing predicament.
The broadcast world is definitely changing. We've seen that here the last couple of years. It's continuing to adjust and change. And this is unfortunately one of the ways in which it is changing, right? So sad to see such a legendary name like John Kelly no longer going to be broadcasting for the St. Louis Blues. But man, what a huge thank you to all the amazing memories that he has provided over the last 20 years. A huge thank you to John Kelly.
Three of them even. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, the St. Louis has had so many, probably more than any other city. Said so many legendary broadcasters come out of it and call games here for professional teams in St. Louis, the Cardinals, the Blues, the Rams. The list goes on. John Kelly right there in the top tier of broadcasters to spend extended period of time in St. Louis. So a huge thank you to him. As Thomas just said, thank you to John Kelly. Listen, we got a lot done here in 43 minutes, gents, as far as discussing some of the offseason moves that the Blues have made, what we like, what we don't potentially like happening if things are to happen. It'll be interesting to keep up with if there's anything, if there is anything to finish with, it's in Army We Trust, right? And this is a guy that's coming into his final season as the president of hockey operations. Is that correct? This is the final one? I believe
so.
Final season. Yep.
Final season. So we'll see what things look like as he sets up Alexander Steen to take things over down the road. It's gonna be fun to keep up with here, and we'll see what ends up happening. He is Thomas Welch. He is Mike Meyer, and I am Ethan Hannaford. And this has been Blues Central on STL Sports Central. We will see you around.